This is called the teleological. And the word telos means design in Latin, the argument from design. So I want you to think about your car, okay? What goes into a car? We're reaping the benefits. Imagine going back 100 years. Well, they had cars 100 years ago. Well, imagine going back 200 years ago, okay? We're so desensitized to the benefits of car and transport that we have that we don't even think about it. But if you go back 200 years ago, they could never imagine in what we're doing. It would be like, it would blow them away. So, but what we have are the benefits of design. And this is the benefits of intelligent design. So let's just look at a sampling of that design. You have an engine, you have batteries with electrical systems, you have a windshield, you have lights. All these are made up of the design in a car. So when you're driving your car, your engine, what is your engine? Your engine is designed to transfer energy from the gasoline to the wheels. Your battery is designed to store energy and transfer it to the electrical systems. Your windshield, what's your windshield? Your windshield is designed to protect the driver from the outside elements. The light is designed to illuminate the roads and to alert other drivers. All this is part of the design. There's an intelligence that goes behind all the elements that are in the car you're driving. It's intentionally designed, okay? And no one would argue that it's an accident. But let's look at, like, even your engine. The engine of a car is made of thousands of parts that all work together to produce the energy, okay? So did all the parts required to make an engine come together in working in a complete system all at once? So what would have to happen to allow this to occur? You ask yourself the question, how can all these parts come together? If someone told you that all these parts are going to come together at once, they're all going to be working together to allow that engine to move, what do you think the odds of that would be? In fact, when we want to look for life on other planets, what are we looking for? We're looking for something out of the ordinary. We want to look for engineered and a demonstration of what life is, or what we would expect life is. So it's very unimpossible that that's going to occur. But so in the engine is integrated into the rest of the car. But let's just look at another example, okay? Here's an engine working, okay? A car engine can propel itself. Engines are designed to propel the car, and they revolve around 2 to 1,000 times per minute, okay? Well, what else has engines? This is a bacteria. A bacteria flagellum, that's the engine of the bacteria. So how does that compare to the car engine? That revolves at 18,000 times per minute. And then you could take 5 million bacteria and you could put them on the head of a pin. And the engine for the bacterial flagellum is much more complex than the engine of a car. Much more complex. So it even has components, okay? It could reverse in an instant. So again, what's the point of this? The point is that it's not logical. It wouldn't be logical to assume a car and a car engine is caused by accident. And then when we take something even more complex, such as the bacteria and the bacterial flagellum, which is the engine of the bacteria, and we say, well, that was caused by accident, it has zero possibility. So when we couple that with the design argument, okay?
Many species of bacteria propel themselves through their environment by spinning helical motorized flagella. 26 subunits of an integral membrane protein called FLF come together in the plasma membrane.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there just because we're running out of time, but I want everybody to see the complexity of what's involved in the engine of a bacterial flagellum, okay? So every bacteria, like not every bacteria necessarily has the same flagellum, but that's how bacteria move in a fluid. And so this is design. So you can see the complexity and you compare it to the complexity of a car engine. The bacterial flagellum engine is much more complex than a car engine. So why is that important? Again, just like we have a first cause of the universe, we have to look at what was the cause of life. And we have two models because we ask ourselves, how did we get here? So the two models, one is what's called a macroevolutionary model. And because there's what's called distinction between what's called macroevolution and microevolution, but we'll get more into that in the coming weeks. But macroevolution is a model that states that life was self-generated from non-living inorganic material. Once the gap from non-life to life was a bridge, the first living cell began to evolve by random changes or mutations in its genetic information system, creating new characteristics that were not in the original organism. That's if you're a naturalist and you're saying, I believe there's no God, and you say, well, how did I get here? Well, the explanation is through macroevolution. There was a first cell, and from that first cell, life evolved without an intelligence behind it into you. So the other model is the design model. And that model states that non-life never produces life, and that the first life forms were the direct result of superintelligence. So that's the conflict, okay? So this is the design argument. So what does macroevolution require? So again, a lot of times someone who is an atheist doesn't necessarily think through the whole process, okay? Macroevolution requires this. And just think how hard this is. The first cell had to form by chance, okay? The very first cell, and that's what's known as the protocell. The very first cell in this macroevolutionary model had to form by chance. But what else did that mean? That first cell had to know one thing. And the one thing that cell had to know is, I need to reproduce myself, or I'm going to be the first and the last of me, okay? So not only did it have to know it had to reproduce itself, it had to know how to reproduce itself. Now you think of the intelligence of a newborn baby, which is much more complex than the first cell. Is that newborn baby going to have the awareness to know, oh, I must be the first human being. I need to reproduce myself, or I'm going to cease to exist? No. So the very first cell had to know it had to reproduce itself. Then it had to know how to reproduce itself. Okay? So then information must be added by. So how do you get from a protocell to a human being, to a bird, to a tree? How do you get there? Information needs to be added, but if there's no intelligence, if there's no outside supernatural intelligence, how do you get that information added? Well, it's through mutation. The idea is that, and you'll hear this word a lot called Mother Nature, okay? Mother Nature is just a euphemism, God's substitute word, okay? It's attributing intelligence to something that has no intelligence, okay? Mother Nature is nothing. Mother Nature is just like assuming that the natural processes are there and Mother is watching over you, okay? It's a made-up term. But information has to be. So how do you get the information for wings, for eyes, for gills, for bones, for pollination? I always like the anglerfish, okay? I always think the anglerfish is my go-to illustration. Is how does this fish know? I need to design a light bulb, okay? I need to go deep underwater. I'm going to design a light bulb, and this light bulb is going to attract all these other fish. And when they see this light bulb, they're going to come to the light bulb, and they're going to, oh, look at the light. Look at the bright light. I'm going to eat the bright light. And then here, I'm going to have my teeth, and I'm going to swallow it as it's trying to eat the bright light. Well, did it design the light bulb? Did it know how the light, was it aware? So all these things have to come in, and to attribute it all to evolution is beyond. So, again, we're running out of time, but so macroevolutionary requires the complexity of the cell, and so when Charles Darwin actually compiled his theory of evolution, he had two parts. One was microevolution, one was macroevolution, and the idea that macroevolution was not even, like, he didn't understand. Charles Darwin had no understanding of how complex life was when he made his theory of evolution. In fact, Michael Denton, he wrote a great book called Darwin's Black Box, and he gets into the complexity of life. So they said, look, let's magnify a cell 1,000,000 times to 20 kilometers. And so this is what, like, and this is in your handout, an explanation. He goes, what would we see if we magnified a cell 20 million times? Okay, we would see what would be an an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. On the surface of the cell would be millions of openings like the potholes or portholes of a vast spaceship, opening and closing to allow continual stream of materials to flow in and out. And if we enter one of these openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology, bewildering complexity. We would see endless, highly organized corridors and conduits branching in every direction away from the perimeter of the cell, some leading to the central memory banks in the nucleus, others to the assembly plants and processing units. And I just want everybody to see, this is what's called a motor protein, okay? You have this inside of you, okay? This is going on inside of the cell. This is by Harvard Bioscience, and this is an actual illustration based upon the actual visualization of what's going on. So this is now going inside of the cell. And so, again, Darwin had no idea how complex life was when he formed his theory. And this is a quote from Darwin. He says, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." He didn't know the complexity because they didn't have the same technology back then. So again, his theory is all based upon what he postulated because he saw minor changes in finches. Therefore, he postulated that it all came from a beginning like that, where that's called macroevolution versus microevolution, which we'll be talking about. And one final thing is, and inside of your body is the genetic code, and that genetic code is made up of your DNA, and your DNA is the language that your cell communicates and breaks down a description of you. Like, so for example, in each of your chromosomes is the genetic book or a chapter describing you, and your elements that make you is your DNA, and the gene is a part of that DNA which talks about how to make a specific program. It's exactly the same as software code. It works exactly the same as the software code, but it's much more complex than software code. And again, why is that important? Because no one would ever assume that a computer that could read software code is an accident, but yet the logic falls apart because the same logic person will say, well, I believe that life just randomly came into existence and that it was encoded into the DNA to store that information and to replicate itself and to increase in its complexity. It's completely ridiculous, but if you don't want to believe it, like my brother here says, if you don't want to believe in God, you're going to create a faith. And just let me atheism is a religion, okay? Because basically the pillars of that religion is that no God exists, that life is an accident, and that the universe came from non-life or came from nothing, and that there's no good and there's no evil, okay, in the universe. Because there's no God, therefore there's no good and no evil, so you're free to do whatever you want. So I'm going to close with that.